in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Today, I'm looking at Dynasty stashes. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's go. Our first stash in the news lately, Deneric Prince. Now, obviously, we can't look at Prince's NFL stats to evaluate him. Why? Because he didn't play. He didn't play in 2023 as a UDFA last year. So he was a very popular stash last year as the UDFA in the 2023 rookie class. He started his college career in 2018, where he did nothing at Texas A&M in 2018 or 2019. But then he transferred over to Tulsa in 2020, where he did get on the field. He had 88 carries for 470 yards, 4 touchdowns, 5.3 yards a carry, and a catch for 11 yards. Then in 2021, 100 carries, 524 yards, 5 touchdowns, 5.2 yards a carry, and 7 catches for 67 yards. And then in 2022, 126 carries, 729 yards, 5 touchdowns, 5.8 yards per carry, 9 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown. Never showed much in the passing game. Had good rushing efficiency, never had a lot of volume. But we know that the Chiefs got something out of a much worse prospect in Isaiah Pacheco. So maybe there's something here in Deneric Prince's profile. Now, why are we talking about Deneric Prince today? He saw some hype last year, but the key thing is that he's working in for RB2 and RB3 reps with Clyde Edwards-Helaire behind starter Isaiah Pacheco ahead of the other running backs. Prince even took some recent reps ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Unfortunately, the other options in the backfield are really having a rough time. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire just passed the physical recently and is kind of easing his way back in. Carson Steele, who I talked about on this channel before, doesn't look like the Chiefs like him very much. They're talking about playing him as a fullback. Makes no sense because he's not a fullback, but he's not doing anything. I have heard zero, and I mean zero, hype about Imani Bailey, the UDFA from this year. He's not going to make the team. And then a lot of people are talking about Luis Rees-Zammit. Luis Rees-Zammit is not a running back. He is nowhere near being a running back. He is there for returns. He is not going to be playing running back. They are trying out Kadarius Toney at running back. Luis Rees-Zammit is competing to be the returner. So right now, they also have Keontae Ingram. Ingram, Bailey, and Prince, it looks like, are competing for one spot as that RB3, the real RB3 behind Pacheco and Edwards-Helaire. I think Prince is leading that competition. If the roster cut were today, Prince would be the one making the team. And we know there's room here for touches behind Pacheco. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not it. So this is a player. Stash him. You'll know. You'll know who makes the roster. And if he makes the roster, keep him. If he doesn't, then move on to someone else. But that's my take on Deneric Prince. Next up, Colby Parkinson. So Parkinson's had a pretty long journey to being relevant. He barely played in 2020 and 2021. And then in the last 2 years on the Seahawks, he had very identical stat lines. In 2022, 25 catches, 322 yards, 2 touchdowns on 34 targets, 1.5 catches, and 18.9 yards a game. And then in 2023, the same 25 catches, actually fewer yards, the same 2 touchdowns, the same 34 targets, 1.5 catches, and 14.5 yards a game. He really didn't get involved. In Seattle, there's just too many players for him to compete with. Never really had a chance. But why is Colby Parkinson a dynasty stash? Well, you're probably going to say, well, Tyler, you always say players who don't get involved early don't usually succeed. And that's true at the wide receiver position. Tight end is very different. There is not much on the Rams tight end depth chart. They have Tyler Higbee, who is hurt, and Parkinson signed a large contract. Now, we know that the Rams placed Tyler Higbee on the PUP recently, recovering from his torn ACL. That's why we're talking about this. This shouldn't be news. I told you this in January that this was going to happen. But to some people who haven't been paying attention, this is news, okay? Parkinson signed a 3-year, $22.5 million contract this offseason with $15.5 million total guaranteed. That contract signals that they don't expect Higbee to come back, especially since they can cut him in 2025. Now, I just read from some of the Rams beat reporters, Parkinson stood out during off-season practices. He stood out during practices recently. He provides an element that the rest of the Rams receiving options do not, as he is 6'7" and 265 pounds. It's important to note also that Parkinson is just 25 years old. As I said earlier, tight ends are not running backs or even wide receivers. They break out far, far later in their careers. A 25-year-old tight end breaking out would not be strange whatsoever. This happens all the time, and Parkinson could be the latest in the line of tight ends to break out. The best part is you don't have to pay for it. You don't have to pay for it. He's still free in some leagues. You can just stash him and get the benefits that way instead of having to pay a higher price. Now, if you like the YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month. And I also have Patreon video roster reviews, which are only available to patrons. I really appreciate everyone who signed up and any new patrons who join. During the season, and really the whole year, questions and answers, especially starts it, will only take place in the Patreon Discord. It will not take place on Twitter. It will not take place in these YouTube comments. So if you want to ask me questions about Dynasty or starts it, those are the places to do so. With that said, let's get into our next player. Malik Washington. Now, obviously, Washington is a rookie, so he has no NFL stats. But he had a ridiculous final season at Virginia, combined with decent production at Northwestern. He didn't do much in his first 2 years of college in 2019 or the COVID-shortened 2020 season. But in 2021, he was solid. He had 44 catches, 578 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And while that's not impressive, he improved in 2022 to 65 catches, 694 yards, and a touchdown on an upward trajectory. Then he transferred to Virginia for 2023, and he absolutely balled out. 110 catches, 1,426 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He led the NCAA in receptions in 2023. So he was excellent last year. Now, why is Malik Washington a dynasty stash? Questionable depth chart after Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And we know that Mike McDaniel, we saw the video, wanted him in the NFL draft really, really badly. Now, let's go into kind of what we're not saying. No one is saying that Malik Washington is going to displace Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle as the top 2 wide receivers. No one is saying that will happen. But there are a few things that have happened recently that make Malik Washington a little bit more interesting. Number one, fellow rookie Taj Washington is out for the season. So there goes one little bit of competition right off the bat. Second, Odell Beckham Jr. is already dealing with injuries and has no timetable to return, which gives Washington a clear path to impress McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa if he decides to show up because of his contract in camp. Now, we know that Malik Washington has the talent, but he fell in the draft. Sometimes all these types of players need is a chance, and his opportunity to get a chance is rising. I'm not saying to go pay anything for Malik Washington, but this is a player where if Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill gets injured, we don't want to root for an injury, but if that did occur, this is someone who could gain a lot of dynasty value, flash in this system very quickly. So it's a player I might want to add to the back of my dynasty roster before that occurs. Now, I always like to cover NFL news, especially rolling in minor NFL news into these videos. So a couple pieces here. Amari Cooper had a contract restructure done. It was a 1-year restructure, so didn't extend him, but they redid his 2024 contract, the Browns did. Fully guaranteed all his money with a $5 million raise. This ended Cooper's holdout threat. I'll be honest, this changes nothing for me. Nothing at all for Dynasty or for redraft. Probably means that Cooper's on a new team for 2025, which honestly seemed likely anyway. It puts an end to some speculation that there's going to be an Amari Cooper, Brandon Ayuk swap. I'd heard that. I never bought that, but this probably puts an end to that. Amari Cooper, I have in Dynasty at wide receiver 42. In redraft, I have him wide receiver 27. I just have too many concerns with Deshaun Watson to rely on Amari Cooper. So It's not necessarily that I don't like him, but at a 30-year-old wide receiver, I'm going to err on the side of probably not having him. Now, our next piece, Michael Gallup retired. Now, Gallup hasn't done much recently, but his retirement slightly clears up the Raiders wide receiver depth chart. Trey Tucker now has a clear shot at the wide receiver 3 job. Tucker flashed as a rookie as a 3rd-round pick. 19 catches, 331 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He played as a starter in the final 2 games. And all of this occurred with Aiden O'Connell, who it's looking like is more likely to be the starter than Gardner Minshew. Now, I didn't move Tucker up that much. He could have been a stash, but I figured I was going to talk about him anyway. Moved him up 5 spots. Maybe I'll talk about him on a future video. He's not a big value, but if Davante Adams is traded at some point, which I do think could happen if the Raiders start off poorly during the season, an in-season trade, Tucker could step up. And now he's a player who should be rostered in all leagues. He should be rostered in all leagues because he is a day 2 pick who flashed as a rookie. I think he should, get a chance maybe this year. Now, we're going to close out the video with 3 Patreon questions. So let's just jump into those. Number 1, one trait or characteristic in a player that you take into consideration in evaluations that you think more fantasy owners should pay attention to. Yes, I think more fantasy managers should pay attention to points that a player scores, fantasy points. It sounds so stupid, right? Wow, pay attention to fantasy points. But it's the best indicator of future success. I mean, not coach speak, not hype, not situation, but past fantasy points lead to future fantasy points. Sounds dumb, but that's, I think, my answer to that question. Do you have any player comps for the top wide receiver and running back rookies this year? So generally, I don't comp. I don't think it's a helpful way to evaluate players at all. I think it's a lazy way to give someone a mental shortcut because realistically, 2 NFL players are not the same, right? Like they're not the same. Every player is different. Every situation is different too. Why do people comp? Because it gets attention. You say that someone is the next Davante Adams. People are saying that about Dontavian Wicks. Oh, he's compared to Davante Adams. Dontavian Wicks and Davante Adams have nothing in common. So that comp is ridiculous. It's lazy. You just do it for clicks and attention. It's not helpful. It's not helpful analysis. It doesn't give you any insight into what that player is actually going to do. 0. So I don't do it. I don't comp. I think it's stupid. So that's my answer to that question. I just focus on, grading each player individually. I don't worry about looking at the past. That doesn't work. And it's proven not to work too. Now, last question. There's a manager in my league that has 3 Packers wide receivers, Watson, Reed, and Romeo Doubs. So I tried to buy one of them cheap with the argument that he shouldn't have 3 wide receivers from the same team. I mean, maybe that argument will work. I don't care about having 3 wide receivers from the same team myself, although I can't really think of a team where I'd have to be in on all 3 at their price. The Packers are the opposite. I'm out on all 3 of these at their price. They're all overpriced. Christian Watson is like priced at his ceiling. He's never going to get volume enough. And he's priced really high. So I'm totally out on Christian Watson. Jaden Reed, I think, is also a little bit overvalued. And Romeo Doubs is kind of a roster clogger. So no, the answer is no, but not because of anything about the argument. The answer is no, because I'm not really in on any of these wide receivers at their price. So yeah, I'm someone on the Packers is going to fail at their price, and none of them have to succeed at their price. So yeah, that's why I'm just not in on this idea all that much. Now, if you liked the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. Likes and comments. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. I'm trying to get to 3,000 subscribers. I'm 40 away. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty, Redraft, Starts It, and more. And every sign-up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all